Just wait another minute and we'll get started. I think we have a lot of participants on. I am going to get started. So really quickly, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar this evening amidst the India-Pakistan match. Really quickly, my name is Nainka Ajani, and I am the Associate Director for the Pre-College Advising Team at the Red Pen. Been around for 7 years now and worked with students from grade 8 onward on their pre-college advising process as well as their undergraduate applications. And, one of the common universities, one of the very popular universities that, is kind of, spoken of a lot and students have at the top of their mind is Stanford. Lots of questions around that. And so the Red Pen, in collaboration with EduExplorer, thought that it would be best for us to have students and parents connect directly with Stanford's finest minds. Sorry, the Red Pen is a boutique education consulting firm. We've been around for over 12 years now and have a team presence of over 120 people across the globe. Diverse team members as well as diverse student body is something that the Red Pen works with. We work with students from preschool up until the PhD level and have various verticals that support students at different stages. We have our pre-college advising vertical where we work with students from grade 8 onward on building their profiles on an academic as well as an extracurricular front, work with students on their undergraduate applications to destinations across the globe, ranging from the US, UK, Canada, Singapore, Hong Kong, liberal arts schools in India and Europe. We have our postgraduate team that works with students on their master's applications. We have our MBA team that supports students with their MBA. We also have a boarding school team that works with students on their boarding school applications, as well as offer institutional support to institutions that are looking for support with their counseling department. Yeah. Here's our recent track record from 2023. Lots of names. I know some of you are smiling, some of you are anxious, some of you are wondering, what's the magic that helped these students get admitted to these top schools across the globe. One of the things that I definitely want to highlight that I think that everyone had in common was that they started thinking about the application process early on. Putting together competitive applications does take time, requires more than just a year of effort, more than just one summer to kind of manage your time well and put together activities and carve out a unique storyline. So none of these, universities are out of reach. It's good for all of us to dream, to have these schools, on our mind. And a lot of the students that were admitted to these schools, don't get me wrong, they weren't all set, they weren't all ready. Of course, they had bouts of anxiety, but starting early was something that really helped them put together the application in a effective manner. Here are various stages that we at the Red Pen have outlined for students to go through in order to kind of, build their profiles competitively from grade 8 onward. Grade 8 is a time, when students are relatively younger. It's a good time to explore, focus on diverse academic and non-academic interests. Moving on to grade 9 should involve a lot more personalization, a lesser focus on many activities, but a focus on fewer activities, in depth, over a consistent and committed manner over a longer period of time. Grade 10 is when students should focus on elevating their activities. So depending on, the area of interest that they're applying for, say, for example, a student looking at applying for a business major, right? Grade 8 is a good time to do an introductory course to business. Grade 9 is a good time to kind of do something entrepreneurial, maybe come up with a business of your own. Grade 10 is a good time to add other aspects to your application. So maybe, a student who's doing a business initiative on increasing access and exposure to financial literacy in their community can move on to doing additional research in that particular area, can go on to kind of, apply for competitive business competitions and further elevate their profile. Grade 11, everyone is very busy with schoolwork. There's a lot happening on the academic side. And grade 11 is when students should spend their time putting their application together. The different pieces of the puzzle finally should come together in grade 11. And that's something that should kind of, reflect in the Common App essays and in other parts of the application. There are various ways and a good time for students to make their, extracurricular activities, to spend time on them is the summer. The multiple activities students, depending on their interests, can pursue, ranging from art and design, so doing maybe a summer program in art, community service initiatives, working on passion projects, something that students kind of have an, innate inkling towards, applying for competitive awards, engaging in competitions. There are so many competitions out there that have deadlines over the next month or two. A summer is a good time to spend your time when, there's lesser pressure on the academic side to kind of hone your extracurricular activities. One of the activities that students can engage in through the summer is attending a summer program. Many benefits to that. And we have EduExplora here with us today, an organization that offers prestigious academic summer programs taught by instructors affiliated with elite institutions ranging from Stanford to UCLA. Students will kind of, attend a lot of classes by professors, researchers, and a lot of professionals in kind of, that are associated with the organization. EduExplora has been around long. They have had over 7,000 students admitted to their programs, representing 30 plus countries, and focused on 130 schools is where they've kind of run their program. Last year itself, EduExplora held their summer camps at Yale and Berkeley. We have Julianne with us here, who is the academic director at EduExplora, and I'm going to let Julianne really quickly introduce herself. Julianne, over to you.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Julianne. I recently received my PhD from Yale University, so not Stanford, but still a great school. And I'm now academic director of EduExplora. So I'm the one that hires all the instructors and puts on the program for all of you to have a competitive academic experience over the summer that's both enriching as well as educationally beneficial, that can help you set yourself up for success for your future.
Lovely. Thank you, Julianne. We also have our panelists. Joel, would you like to quickly introduce yourself as well? Joel is an entrepreneur. He's an educator and, has kind of a triple degree. So I'm going to let Joel talk a little bit more about his background and his experiences.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for sharing your time with us today. Really appreciate it. It's true. Somehow I got admitted to Stanford as an undergraduate, where I thought I was only going to spend 4 years, but that led to several degrees. And then I got involved with a really creative travel program, educational travel program, as part of the Alumni Association at Stanford. So not only was I involved as a student, but then a little bit later, I became familiar with many of the alumni at Stanford who had been students long before I was ever there. And now, perhaps in a manner of thinking as a full circle, I've been on the Stanford faculty for nearly 15 years, teaching among themes a topic called design thinking. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes today. So It's really been full circle. It's been a great privilege for me. I didn't anticipate a future in academics, but in retrospect, and we can talk a little bit more about my background a little bit later on, but in retrospect, it seems to have made a lot of sense. In one capacity, it's been really gratifying for me to be able to share some of the curriculum that my colleagues and I have developed over the years. It's really been a privilege to be able to share some of those ideas now in a more firmly established curriculum and finally recognized curriculum with energetic and inquisitive students such as yourselves. So I'm really happy to be a part of the panel for today.
Thank you, Joel. We have a couple of questions that we'd like to propose to you after we let Maral introduce herself. Maral is another panelist on the webinar today, and she as well has done postdoctoral work at Stanford University and received a fellowship in pain research. I'm going to let Maral speak a little bit more about her background.
So I guess I completely understand the student body or the prospective student body from India because I'm a little bit from everywhere myself. I'm ethnically Armenian, but I was raised in Lebanon. My undergraduate degree was at the American University of Beirut. And perhaps just like you guys, my thought was, where do I go next? And how do I get there? It's a bit of a challenge, right? It's a bit of a challenge when, Yale is not 2 blocks away from where you live, right? So it requires quite a bit of thinking and planning. But I guess similar to what Joel was saying, I didn't know where I was going to end up. In fact, I didn't even know if I was going to be a neuroscientist. I come from a family where the only 2 jobs are engineer or doctor, and I chose medicine. I was part of I was in the biology pre-med program. But I was very curious about other subjects. So I took, in addition to my biology major, I did 2 minors in chemistry and psychology. And by the time I was about to graduate, I realized that the intersection of those things is something I enjoy quite a bit, which is, of course, neuroscience, right? And to that end, I said, oh, maybe I can learn more about this. I didn't think about a career. I just said, maybe I can learn more about this. So I got my master's at McGill University, and I was studying just neuroscience in snails, in fact, and people often laugh. It's like, snails, who cares about snails? Well, people have gotten Nobel Prizes in physiology or medicine studying molluscan nervous systems. So it's actually quite significant. After my master's, I continued to get my PhD at McGill University from the Faculty of Medicine, Neurology and Neurosurgery. And then I realized, okay, now this is starting to look like a career. So I applied for postdocs. And again, I didn't know where I was going. I applied for postdocs in Australia, in the UK, and in the States. And eventually I settled on Stanford. My first choice was Australia. But for many other reasons, we couldn't go there. So we ended up going to Stanford. I was there for many years where, in addition to being a postdoctoral fellow at the Faculty of Department of Anesthesiology and Perioperative Services at the School of Medicine, I was also involved with a lot of outreach and teaching, something I enjoyed quite a bit, and something I did at McGill and something that I continued at Stanford. As of 2018, I'm back on the East Coast, this time in New York City, and I'm an assistant professor at Queens College, City University of New York, and I have my own lab, so now it is a career. I do research and I run my lab. If you're interested, you can just go to tajarianlab.com and learn a little bit about some of the work that we do.
Thank you, Maral, for sharing. We have a lot of students interested in knowing more about, lab work that they can do through high school. So I will be asking you a lot more questions about that.
Awesome.
So moving on, we will kind of discuss with Joel a little bit about design thinking. He's going to tell us a little bit about Stanford's design school and the process of innovation that they, teach students about. So Joel, over to you.
All right. Thank you very much. So as an undergraduate at Stanford, I was mainly involved in the Department of Mechanical Engineering. And so technically my degrees are in engineering, but what we began thinking about, and the term design thinking wasn't even a term back then. So I don't know if many of you have heard this term design thinking. If you haven't, there's certainly nothing to be worried about, because frankly, it's a new term, but it's a new term that applies to concepts that have been around, well, I don't know, probably since Archimedes. And so what we were concerned about, my colleagues and myself, one of the big questions is, can we teach someone to be innovative? Can we teach someone to be creative? And especially in many of my fellow engineering students as undergraduates, they had no interest in creativity at all. And when it came to, I don't know, quantum dynamics or solving an equation, there was just one specific answer that we were trained to look for. The question was there, the equation was there, and you were to come up with the prescribed answer, or you were wrong. But we determined that, in fact, the process by which you examined a situation or came up with an answer, that it was the process which was actually critical, and not just coming up with the answer. So many people ask, well, what is design thinking? They will tell me. This is, in fact, one question that we usually begin our workshops and our seminars with, is what is design thinking? We ask the students to come up with an answer. And it's really the diversity of answers that the students come up with that sets the stage for a community of collective thinking about how to apply this process to a wide variety of design situations. So we came up with this chart, and I'm hoping you can all see it. Stanford D School, that stands for the School of Design, or the Design School, the design thinking process. So it's really important, and we try to emphasize now that two things that I think are relevant. One is it's a process of approaching and understanding a situation that can benefit from design thinking, from analyzing. And this chart actually shows you not only kind of each step along the way, but a sequence. So we have tried to come up with a curriculum that introduces and invites students to think creatively about different design situations. So this is a very different process than traditional mechanical engineering. And honestly, it's been introducing and talking about this process has been a bit of a challenge, as you could imagine, especially when you're challenging rather, I'll put this gently, institutional minds that have been brought up on a much more explicit curriculum. So just to give you an idea of the time frame, and I don't want to totally date myself, but I was an undergraduate at Stanford in the 1970s. All right, that's quite a long time ago, at least for us out here in California. You know, our history doesn't go back that far. And just last year, think about the time involved in this process. Just last year, Stanford finally agreed to a major in design. So there is now an association with the design school. Undergraduate students, and that's mainly who I work with, can now actually study and get a degree in design. So let me then expand, if I can, the process here in one other capacity that I think is important. Since we graduated, and this was back in the late 70s, we anticipated that the process could be applied in many different situations well beyond the scope of engineering. So even though we were in the School of Engineering, we began to seek other interdisciplinary pathways where this process could be applied. And that was a critical turning point in the evolution of what we call design thinking. So nowadays, and in fact with the new School of Design, the emphasis isn't so much on building a better bridge or even designing a more efficient bicycle, but rather taking a look at different conditions and different situations that can be improved by a creative and empathetic understanding of a context. The other focus that has come around over the last really 15 years is a decision, a deliberate decision, that rather than really focusing on what we might call superfluous items or products, to really focus on some of the more intrinsic challenges that face all of us, either individually, collectively, as a culture, or globally. So now, just to bring you a little bit further along in this process, which has taken 50 years, by the way, but I mean, we're just thrilled that it's finally been accepted as an actual academic curriculum. Let me just mention that one of the key elements, even in the undergraduate education of design and design thinking, involves now 5 major themes. And we can talk a little bit later, if you wish, about what the undergraduate education in design looks like, but these 5 major themes are relevant. The first one, and I think you will all be able to identify with them, the first one is climate and environment. And we've certainly heard a lot about this, regardless of where you may live in the world. Certainly climate and our sort of human contributions to climate dynamics. This is something really worth studying and looking into, especially when it comes to, and I've spent a lot of time with coastal communities around the world, especially in light of the fact that you have definite climate related impacts on how they live their lives, especially in coastal communities. This has been a very important area of study. Additionally, living matter. And Maral, this is an area that you're obviously much more intimately connected with, as well as having such a much more profound understanding of the intricacies of, in this case, say, neuroscience. But as a general theme, living matter, organic systems. This is also designated as one of the key themes for design students to study. Global development. And I think we all realize that in earlier times, we used to think about certain aspects of how we live as being very particular to our little neighborhood. And we see, and this was an interesting concept that I think visually was enunciated by the first picture of the planet taken from outer space, where people could really see the blue sphere, really see the planet as a single interrelated, well, it's an organism, really, a single related entity. So global development, this is also one of the 5 major themes for undergraduate study in design. The last 2, one is healthcare. And again, Maral, you're probably familiar with this. This is an area that I know a little bit about, and I'm happy to not get too long-winded, but I can tell you stories about how my own inclinations toward design thinking related to healthcare, but healthcare is certainly a dynamic field. And finally, the 5th major theme of study is oceans. And I think that we can all relate to that. And certainly one understanding is how oceans and changes, even what we would consider small changes in ocean dynamics, can have really much more enunciated changes and consequences on a global level. So those are within now this brand new school of design. These are the 5 major themes. Let me also mention that whereas the roots of design thinking were really, say, nested in the Department of Engineering, the School of Engineering, it has really grown to encompass and invite a much more interdisciplinary study. So we have students studying design that come from many different disciplines. So one of the questions is, how do you prepare for a curriculum in design thinking? And the answer is to first understand the process and then think about how this process can be allocated or aligned with areas of your particular interest. If I, as now an instructor, and I will have to see if I'm given this question, but if I wanted to make any recommendations about how you choose an academic pathway for yourselves, especially in reference to design thinking, but not exclusively, I would say follow your own interests. And almost undeniably, there will be plenty of curricular and academic opportunities within that particular interest. But I would say that motivation, that should come from somewhere within your heart or within your context. I would encourage you to follow a path, an academic path or a path of growth that really aligns with some topic that really excites you. And then we can think about how the concepts of design thinking can be applied to a theme of your choosing. Let me just take one moment. How are we doing on time? I don't want to overstep my bounds here, but I did want to take just maybe 3 minutes, and you can keep me on track, just to go step by step through this process that we have organized and is illustrated graphically here. The underlying question is, can creativity be taught? How do you invite students to integrate or explore creative aspects of their particular study? And to help invite that philosophy or that approach, we have these what are considered now, and I don't know if they're getting traditional or not. We'll see. Maybe their designation is traditional. Maybe that's in the next few years. But let me just start out quickly and just briefly introduce these 5 phases. The first one, empathize. And that is just the invitation to really understand, especially in the context of people and cultures. Empathy is your open-minded exploration to better understand what a context or what a situation is. And this is generally done by talking with the people for whom that context is relevant. So understanding a situation from a human-centered perspective has really become a critical and important element of the design process. So empathy, try to understand. And sometimes you bring a perspective to the picture that the people involved may not even realize. Second, to better define the problem or the issue. And so then we begin to look a little bit more critically at what's involved in improving a situation. I can give you examples, but we'll take it a step at a time. The third element here or phase of design thinking is called ideation. And this is typically, and this is a very important part, typically done in small teams. And we have found, I know one of the questions is, where does a person who graduates from the design school, where do they go? And one of the critical elements is to be able to work with other people as a team. And so the ideation, the process of ideation, is typically done in teams. And this is where you come up with all kinds of ideas. Another term we have used in the past called brainstorming, where we solicit innovative ideas to the issue that we have empathized with and defined. Finally, the fourth phase is to come up with some specific concepts, approaches, or products. And it's just called the prototyping phase. And this is where you understand what the situation is, you better define it, you've come up with a whole variety of possible solution pathways, and then you take a few of those and you begin to build a prototype. Typically, prototypes, as it says here, they're quick and easy, but they illustrate and embody a concept. Part of the goal, as maybe irrational as this sounds, part of the goal is to have ideas that don't work out. And by having ideas that don't work, you can very quickly and insightfully learn more about the ideas that do. So there's a little phrase, it's fail early and fail often. And through that process, It's an iterative process. You begin to refine the answers that you have come up with. And then finally, those answers or those solutions, the final phase of this process is to test them out and try and see if they work. So, I mean, there's an example, one sort of crazy little example. How's my time? I can give you a one that I think everyone can relate to, and that is bicycle traffic. And I don't know, Maral, if you remember from your time on Stanford, but it is chaos. When it comes to bicycles, it's absolutely chaotic. And, you talk about the hazards and of a college experience. Most of us don't think about getting run over by a bicycle, but the fact is many college students have had very little experience riding a bicycle. I think all of you certainly have, you would, in terms of your bicycle riding skills, you'd probably fit right in. The challenge was, how do you reorganize or make a bicycle traffic safer at Stanford? And so if you think about the answer, how do you organize bicycles and bicycle riders in the concept of design thinking? Well, right now we're in the prototype and test phase, and we're going to have to see how it works out. But we have new bike lanes and little roundabouts. Nobody knows how to use them. And honestly, they're supposed to be one-way bicycle lanes, and that's just chaos. So right now we're in the prototyping and test stage, and the answers are still yet to be discovered. I notice we've moved beyond. Do you have another question, or is that enough for right now?
Yes, Joel, thank you so much for sharing the different steps, process of innovation, and for sharing with us the different themes that are covered for students that are pursuing design thinking as a major. And congratulations on, playing a role in that being offered as a major. Joel, I do know that you've kind of seen the inception of the computer. And I wanted to ask you as to how you think STEM education has evolved since the computer's inception. If you could share some insight on that.
Yeah, and I'll try to be gentle on this. Again, an instructor of my vintage, we, and especially in engineering, we didn't have computers. And so this was, I don't know if any of you remember a slide rule, perhaps you've seen them in some type of museum, but we had ways of actually calculating equations. They were mechanical. Without getting too distracted, I remember on a previous visit to India, there was a fabulous, it was almost like an astronomy park. I think it was Jantar Mantar. Anyway, this, if you can believe it, there were analog ways of calculating complex equations. Well, computers do the same thing, but they just do it in a way much faster, and we hope in a more predictable fashion. So, boy, I had the joy of actually meeting both Mr. Hewlett and Mr. Packard. I remember using their first handheld calculators. In fact, there was another company, Texas Instruments. This was really in the early days. What I have found, and again, keep me on track in terms of the time involved. Part of my own background in the medical field was I was interested in optics. I still am. And I came to a doctor. He was the director of the ophthalmological research department at Stanford. And I asked him why we can't simply reshape the cornea. And this was back in the mid 70s. And he is a wonderfully eccentric British scientist. He kind of scratched his beard. He had a little goatee. He looked up over his glasses and he says, "Joel, that is a very good question." And I was hoping to find out now the answer. And he says, "How would you like to find out the answer?" So I spent several summers in this lab exploring what then later led to orthokeratology and now LASIK surgery. The reason I mention that as an example is that much of the STEM education evolved along with the tools that were available in order to really facilitate that curriculum. So computers, I think, have given students now much more freedom to explore a wider variety of these STEM topics. Simply, and I know there are still those including other professors my age, who says, nope, students should learn how to use a slide rule. I'm not so concerned about how the answers are derived as I am concerned about students understanding the concepts and the dynamics of finding an answer. So I think computers really can expand the breadth of STEM education. And I personally, I'm in favor of that as long as the concepts are made clear. And that's a reflection on the, I would say, the refinement of the instructor. Okay, I see. Is this another question?
Yes, there is, Joel. One more question for you before we connect with Morale. Joel, if you can share with us what changes in students' interests you've noticed, any kind of new areas or any potential areas of focus in terms of student curiosity?
Right. That's a really excellent question. There are several dynamics at play here. And I only mean this in the most benevolent and inspirational manner. But many students at Stanford have arrived at Stanford. And again, I want to really congratulate Red Pen on the preparatory curriculum that you have initiated. When you ask, I will answer this question as honestly as I can. Many of the students at Stanford are there because of their achievements. And so they have a long history and, how should I say, a persona that has really benefited on achievements and having those achievements contribute to a community. If there is a compromise, and there's always going to be a bigger picture to the picture, I would say the compromise for students is being able to live their lives and not be overwhelmed with the anxieties of achievement. I will, and allow me a kind of a personal moment here. I have 3 daughters, my wife and I. Those 3 daughters, they are in college right now. And one of whom is a freshman at Berkeley, another one who is a junior at Berkeley, and another one who is studying at a University of California at Santa Cruz. They're, and I don't want to get too long-winded, but their senior year in high school was at the time of COVID. So they were essentially deprived of their senior year at high school. It was all at home, all on Zoom, very little in the way of any kind of social or interactive activities. So this left a kind of a social scar, if you will, and one that we've been working hard to grow from. So part of what I wanted to mention is that in many college students' lives these days, there is an underlying anxiety that is maybe, in fact, partially due to a spirit of achievement, for which I applaud, but also because there maybe hasn't been a lot of curriculum attention devoted to balance in the lives of the students. So when you talk about interests that may have shifted over time, I'm just calling on my own experience. I think that we did many other kinds of activities besides studying for an exam or achieving a certain goal. So if anything, I would encourage students these days, and I do, to follow their passions, but follow it in a variety of contexts beyond the strict academic and curricular demands that they perceive as requisite in their achieving of their academic goals. So that would be my comment, that if there is a way to somehow encourage students to be a little more balanced in their approach, and if they can diminish levels of anxiety or diminish their own critique of their successful achievements, I think that will hopefully allow or invite a more human-oriented college experience. Anyway, that's my own personal opinion, but I do have 3 daughters. Those are my data points. And in that respect, they have been my teacher in that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joel, for sharing. I definitely do agree with you. A human-centric approach is something that, always works. It's important to have the right amount of balance. We do have a few more questions for you that we'll try and take on toward the end, as we are running a little bit short on time. Moving on to Maral. Maral, we do have a few questions that we've put together for you as well. Starting with sharing with our audience a little bit about neuroscience. What exactly is neuroscience, and what are the experiences that shaped your journey while you were pursuing it?
So thank you very much. So from the name neuroscience, you would assume that it's the study of the nervous system, right? In particular, neurons, and that's how it's kind of been since the field started. The field of neuroscience is relatively new. Oftentimes when I first start teaching the students, I ask them, when do you think neuroscience became a thing in itself? And it's very, very recent. It's like the last 80 years or so, it's a thing in itself, right? So very recent. And in fact, I'm not even happy with the name, you know, so usually I end up complaining about the name because I say neuroscience is so much more than neurons, you know, because if you study the brain, for example, which everyone in neuroscience thinks is kind of important, if I take someone's brain and pull out all the neurons from the brain, most of the brain will still be intact. Can you believe that? When I heard that as a student the first time, I felt kind of cheated. I'm like, the field is called neuroscience, but neurons are not even the majority of cells in the brain. What? We should rename this thing, right? And in fact, in my lab right now, we study all parts of the brain. We study other types of cells in the brain. We study the environment where neurons work, because those are all, in my opinion, part of neuroscience, but are understudied. So what is neuroscience? Neuroscience is an evolving concept. It's still very poorly named, but in general, it's the study of how any organism processes information, reacts to an environment, and so on. What experiences have shaped my journey while pursuing neuroscience? Like I was saying earlier, you know, I never went to college thinking I'm going to be a neuroscientist. It kind of happened based on my curiosities, right? And what I felt drawn into. And I think that's always a good idea. You know, it becomes a labor of love. It becomes something that you enjoy doing. So for me, the experiences that mainly shaped my journey while pursuing neuroscience were working with different animal systems, actually, and model systems. I've worked with invertebrates, I've worked with vertebrate animals, I've worked with humans, human tissues, and so on. And I've seen neuroscience through different contexts, sometimes in a very theoretical sense, sometimes very empirical, but science for science. Let's just see how this thing works in the snail, right? No human application at all. And sometimes really seeing it through a clinical lens. You know, how can we cure chronic pain? How can we help people who have this rare condition called TBRS, and so on and so forth, right? And it kind of makes you think about it in terms of applicability and clinical goals as well.
Lovely. Thank you, Maral. If you can spend a little bit more time, a lot of our high schoolers, you know, want to kind of understand the space better. They haven't had the chance to be exposed to neuroscience yet at the high school level, while they may have studied biology and chemistry. In order for them to understand the field better, are there any lab experiences that you recommend they could undertake through high school?
I'm so happy that we're talking about this, because getting a neuroscience degree and certainly having a career in neuroscience has changed significantly throughout the years. And even myself, I mean, I started graduate school in 2005. Back then, it was easier. It was easier to get to graduate programs. And I say this, you know, even though I did it myself back then. So I always wonder, like, if I applied now, would it have been as easy, right? Probably not, because the bar it keeps going up. When we wrote an application package years ago for an undergraduate program in neuroscience, no one expected people to have lab experience. You know, a good student would have been a student who has straight A's, maybe some volunteer activities and so on, and they're good to go. And nowadays, you know, I've reviewed applications for the Stanford program. I do PhD admissions here in New York City as well. And the bar keeps rising higher and higher. So when undergraduate students are applying, most of them have research experience. And at our university now, I have a specialized college in front of us, and I get many high schoolers wanting to volunteer in a lab to get that type of lab experience. So the advice would be to look around you, institutions around you, and try to find small tasks that they can do in labs just to gain that experience, because just having A's doesn't cut it anymore.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Maral. There definitely has been the competitiveness of applicants has been increasing year on year, and there's a lot more that students are doing. Another area that you mentioned briefly is research. Research is as well something that students have started pursuing a lot, especially in the pandemic. Through COVID, as travel was limited, and the opportunity to move away for the summer, attend any summer schools, interact with projects online, offline became harder. So research was definitely something where we saw growing interest among students, and we currently have lots of our students that do engage in research. Very interesting topics, very unique topics, cater to their specific interests. But I wanted to check: are there any forms of research that you recommend high school students to take? Are there any kind of ways in which you recommend they approach professors or lab professionals for further guidance?
Yes, excellent questions. Again, very practical. Oftentimes, I tell students to adjust their expectations with the effort that they're putting in it. So I always tell people, I'm not going to teach you how to do brain surgery if you come to my lab for 2 months. That's never going to happen, ever. I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how hardworking you are. That's not how long that takes, right? However, I still, over the years, have gotten amazing students at the high school level even. I volunteer to mentor high schoolers in summers through different programs, including federally funded programs here. And I've gotten some really smart students, and they can do various tasks that could involve histology, for example. You can teach anybody to section brains, right? If you can cut meat in a deli, if you can section mortadella, you can section a brain, right? It's not a difficult thing. So students participate in things like that. They can analyze behavioral tasks, for example. They can put questionnaire data together if it's human stuff. They can, there's always something to work with. I just expect the students who are interested to really know what they're offering. I don't want them to expect they're getting something that they will not get at that level. It's steps, it's baby steps. It's always the first step that's hard to take. And oftentimes students want to jump to the 10th step. That's not going to happen. You're going to start with cleaning mouse poo in the lab. That's the first step. And I'm very open with students about it because that's how learning happens. In terms of how to approach professors, I expect them to approach with humility, first of all, because professors are very, very busy. They don't have to mentor high schoolers. We don't get anything back from mentoring high schoolers. We do it as an outreach. We do it as a volunteer activity. So you have to be polite. You have to address them properly. You have to be flexible with your time. You can't say, I can only come 3 hours a week and I want to do this. No one's going to respond to that email. Ideally, you also want your email to be succinct, polite, and you can put any attachments that you would think would be important, but do not overwhelm the professor. Maybe a one-page CV and a brief academic transcript. Those are things I usually evaluate people on. And really be flexible in terms of, giving interview availability times and things like that.
Yeah, I definitely agree, Maral. Definitely students. I know professors are so busy. They're reviewing multiple papers and teaching across the board. So definitely important for students to be humble, to kind of, be flexible with their time in order to, have access to the professor's time. So thank you for sharing that. Another question, I know you mentioned, and biology, chemistry definitely are important subjects when it comes to neuroscience. Are there any other high school subjects you recommend for students? We work with students across various Indian and international curricula. So any particular subjects that you recommend they take through high school, and any other insights on any early preparation that students would benefit from?
Absolutely. In fact, I recommend math. Very solid understanding of math and logic, because that's what you need for literally everything. To have a conversation with somebody, you need that. So I cannot emphasize this enough. And in fact, I'm always put off when I'm talking to colleagues who are neuroscientists who tell me things like, I hate math. That's why I went to biology. I'm like, I can't trust you as a neuroscientist if you're not good at math, right? And in fact, many of the tools that we use, have computational aspects, modeling aspects, and so on. So you do need to have that type of very solid understanding. Computer science knowledge, programming, maybe 1 or 2 languages, again, super important, both when doing the research itself, especially if it has computational elements, as well as analyzing research data later on, even if the research itself is based on biochemistry or molecular biology, you still need to analyze it. And if you have that type of computational or programming background, that's going to be super helpful. In fact, when students ask to join my lab, whether as undergraduate, master's, or PhD students, when I look at their CV, that's a screen that I use as well. If I get a student who has a good, solid background in neuroscience related field, I don't care if it's neuroscience exactly, but related, but they can code, they go to the top of the pile automatically. To give you an idea, one of the projects we're working on now is we're developing virtual reality modules as treatment for chronic pain and brain restructuring. And I have an undergraduate student working on that. And the reason she can work on it is because she has both an art and a computer science background. So she can actually design these virtual environments. And her neuroscience knowledge is still, it's early days for her, but she's an excellent researcher in that context because she has that background. So definitely math, programming, very important.
Lots of skill set development, lots of skills that you're looking for, more than just neuroscience specific knowledge. Definitely research, logical reasoning, analyzing, coding.
Yes, because the knowledge they can remember, I can teach them the parts of the brain. I can teach them the surgery. I can't teach them to do all these other background works that I need them. And more importantly, I can't teach them to be motivated to do these things, So those are, in my opinion, far more superior to just neuroscientific knowledge.
Awesome. Yeah, that's something that we kind of convey to students as well. Focus on core subjects, focus on skill set development. And that's something that Maral we cover with students through our mentorship program, where we design workshops and, information sessions to support them with building their skills through high school.
Awesome.
Last question for you, Maral. Lots of new career pathways that students take on. So many new careers exist today that didn't exist a few years ago. So if you can share some insight into recent career pathways of students that you've, mentored.
That's a great idea. So, okay. So a lot of people assume that if you're going the neuroscience route, maybe if you're interested in medicine, you go down the route of neurology, neurosurgery. If you're interested in basic research, you go down academia and you have a lab in a university. If you're interested in industry and more maybe translational work, you go to, biotech and pharma and so on. However, one thing I always tell students is that these are just some of the more popular ones, or maybe the ones you've heard of the most. However, by no means are they the only pathways available. In fact, in addition to doing teaching and mentoring and running a lab, I run 2 companies. One is a science consulting firm, and the other one is actually a fashion company, because I also love fashion. And the company makes adaptive garments for people with chronic pain. So if I had told somebody when I was a student, in addition to being a researcher and a scientist, I'm also going to have a fashion company, they would have laughed at me. But why? Why can't you do both, right? I like playing, video games, and I like consulting to make video games more realistic or more fun. And I can design these brain-computer interfaces in video games, and I do that. Why not, right? Who's going to stop me? So there are a million career paths you can go down to. In fact, one of our colleagues who worked with us on our company too eventually quit after getting his PhD in nanotech. He quit science altogether and became a game designer. Why not? Right. So these are just people we know from our circle. Right now, most of my students are interested in MD PhD programs. So if they do a master's with me, they move on to MD PhD programs. And when they're doing PhDs with me, they're interested more in academia. But some people also like working in industry. The pay is better. The hours are more structured. You don't need to worry about student emails at like 12 saying a mouse escaped or the surgery went wrong and then you have to drive to the lab to fix it. So they have their pros and cons.
Lovely. Thank you, Maral. And I love that you've spoken about your varied interests and how you kind of, combine them together. There's so many of us, so many students right now that are focusing on combining their different interests, be it, art and design, along with, business. They are, designing, websites and, their entrepreneurial, ventures. So thank you so much for sharing that. And yes, I completely agree. There's a wide array of career pathways, and what's really important is to enjoy what you're studying, and that will come to you as and when. So thank you so much. We will open it up to questions for you right at the end. We are running short on time, so I'm quickly gonna ask Julianne a couple of questions about EduExplora and a little bit about summer programs. What are the benefits according to you, Julianne? If you want to share some insights, we have a ton of students that look at summer programs, all with different expectations out of it. So if you can share a little bit about what you think the benefits of EduExplora summer programs are.
Yeah, so there's many benefits. One of them I think is the most dramatic is just experiencing college life on a college campus, at least for our program, because the students stay in the dorms, they go to classes in the university's classrooms. They also go to dining halls and really just experience what it's like to be a college student. And one thing that I actually enjoy seeing as both an instructor for EduExplora and as academic director is just students growing personally. They learn to be more responsible, set their own alarm, get up, get themselves ready, do their laundry. Many students in our program have a lot of them don't do laundry at home because, they're 13 and they've never done that before. Just overall college readiness. In terms of academics, you have a better understanding of what's expected when you go to college. And with our classes, especially, students are taught classes that only are in colleges. And also students get to explore different academic topics that they wouldn't otherwise, like neuroscience, right? Or even design thinking. Those things are not in normal high school curriculum. And some other really important things are building connections. So you're out of your comfort zone when you go to a university like Yale or Berkeley in our programs, and you really bond with all the other classmates and all your other friends that you develop during that summer program, and you build lifelong friendships with people all over the world. It also helps you build your confidence in making friends. I mean, some of the survey results from students said, I never expected to actually make friends, and they do. And you hear about them meeting each other in different countries, and it's just really a pleasure to see that bond form. And it overall reduces anxiety for students. And you learn how to apply for college. We do provide admissions talks for students so they get a better idea of what's expected to apply for college. And then it overall just broadens your horizons. It also makes you more independent and mature and ready for college that you wouldn't otherwise get.
Yeah, thank you, Julianne. I think that's very, very similar to the feedback that we receive from parents and students. A lot of them feel like if they've attended a summer school, they have a good sense of what college life would be like. It gives them a good opportunity with a limited amount of time to actually experience what college is like before they finally head to college. So that's something that, definitely helps. And even the skill sets that you mentioned that students develop of kind of, collaborating, meeting diverse students from different countries, developing skill sets that they don't, have the time or, exposure to explore in their home countries. So definitely agree with those value adds and the takeaways that you mentioned. If you can just take a minute to describe a typical day schedule at summer at EduExplora. Any of the programs that are going to be held through the summer?
Yeah, sure. So our programs are filled with academically and even culturally enriching classes and activities. And so every day starts with breakfast. And so Monday through Friday, students take 3 classes a day. and you take it with the same cohort. And so you really build a bond while learning with your cohort. And all our students, or all our classes, are taught by amazing instructors like Maral and Joel. And you have lunchtime like I said, in the dining halls. And then after class, we host a lot of really fun activities that students get to learn and experience both the local community as well as making friends. And then, as I've mentioned before, all our students really grow just as people. Some examples of the activities are museum tours. We have a talent show, which the students always love. And then the last night, the students have a closing ceremony, and then we have a dance party for them to celebrate all the students' accomplishments. And during the weekend between the two programs, students go on adventurous field trips to surrounding areas. So when we have our program at Berkeley, they went to San Francisco, or if they're at Yale, they go to New York. And just each day, students have free time to walk around the university and really experience what it's like to be a college student, and that flexibility with choosing what you do with your time and your schedule.
Lovely, Julianne. Sounds really exciting, fun, yet a lot of learning for students that do kind of come to campus. I wish I could attend a summer program again. Sounds like so much fun. We are running short on time. So any questions that anyone has for Joel, Maral, or Julianne, we have another 2 minutes to take them on. Feel free to type them in the chat box. But it is very early for all three of our panelists here today, and they've kind of taken the time to wake up, being on the other side of the globe, and take time out to speak to all of us. So thank you so much, Joel, Maral, Julianne, for taking the time to speak with our students and parents. It's been a pleasure having you all three. I am going to give this a minute more for any questions. I don't see anything in the chat box yet.
I did answer a couple of questions in the chat box, if anyone.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Julia.
Questions.
Lovely. Okay, for any questions that students or parents do have, I will reach out to either of you three independently. We have attached our details here, our contact number, email address, as well as a QR code that you can use to schedule an appointment with the Red Pen. If you have any questions for our panelists here, as well as if you want to know anything about the Red Pen's mentorship program, how we support with skill set development and work with students early on to kind of ensure that they have competitive applications during their time of application. So I will end this webinar here. And
thank you all.
Reach out for any questions. Thank you so much, Joel, Maral, Julianne.
Thank you
for taking the
Hope to see you all.
Yeah.
See you at our programs this summer.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.